Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Completionist. So anyway guys, this is going to be my last video there for a while. I am getting ready to head back to Alberta for work. It is getting close to the first week of April, so I just wanted to get a video made, before I have to take off again. So anyway, the video that I wanted to make is I wanted to talk about the games that I actually completed over winter break. I usually set a rule to myself that the minimum amount of games that I actually want to complete to 100% and permanently retire is at least 5. And thankfully, just in time, I've reached that magic number of 5 games fully completed to 100% and permanently retired. And I just wanted to make a video talking about those 5 games and what I thought of them and some of the difficulties that comes when it comes to completing them. So anyway, let's not waste any time because it wouldn't surprise me if this was going to be a very long video to begin with anyway. So anyway guys, the first game that I actually completed to 100% is a game for the NES. It's a game that I've had quite a troubled history with because I played it quite a lot when I was younger, but it's only now that I actually managed to complete it and permanently retire it. And that game is Dragon Warrior for the NES, the plain Jane vanilla version on the original system that it was released on. So what compelled me to play Dragon Warrior, to actually make time to actually complete this game to 100%? Well, for me, it was the very first game that got me into JRPGs to begin with. I remember, watching cable television, and I remember just seeing this epic commercial about Dragon Warrior because, as a kid I loved shows, that dealt with medieval times, and, one of my favorite movies as a kid was Willow. And the fact that I seen this epic commercial from Nintendo that focused on medieval times in a turn-based RPG format just really appealed to me. So when I got my Nintendo for Christmas, one of the first games that I wanted to rent for it was the original Dragon Warrior, and my dad had rented it at the rental place. And when I played it, I didn't do very well in it. I didn't realize that you actually had to walk back and forth until you leveled up enough to move on to the next part of the game. And unfortunately, when you were on a 2-day rental, because you would normally rent games on the weekend, and that was not nearly enough time, especially as a kid, to actually get this game beaten. And this was even before the days of the internet. So unfortunately, if you were playing the game as it got released, it's incredibly cryptic. Not everything is going to be given to you, and it's going to take a lot of troubleshooting and a lot of wandering around and just trying to figure out things on your own, especially if you were playing it for the first time. And so the first time I played it as a kid, I never got very far in it. I think I might have got to the second town, but that was about it. But despite me not doing very well in the game, I still wanted to eventually give it a try. Now, I did own this game, and the reason why I own this game is because I was subscribed to Nintendo Power at the time that they were giving away free copies of the game, as an advertisement, to get more people to play the game. So I actually got to own this game. And I remember in the mid-1990s, even in the mid-1990s, I didn't even have internet in my household. I just finally decided to sit down and finally beat it, just to see if I could. And unfortunately, without access to the internet, things were still incredibly cryptic. Like, I remember getting stuck when I played this game 15, 16 years old, and for some apparent reason I couldn't find the Steps of Sunlight. That's at Tantagel Castle. I just couldn't find it. You know, obviously I didn't look very hard enough, but I remember just getting stuck, and because of that I couldn't make the Rainbow Bridge, you know, to get over to Dragonlord's Castle. And during that time I just got so incredibly fed up that I couldn't figure it out, that I just put the game down and I never played it again for a really long time. So I decided to change that, and actually a game that's been quite a bit of a pain for me, I finally decided to sit down and actually get this game finally completed for good, and I finally did. So what did I think of it? It's, you know, it is a bare bones RPG at its very core, but it still has, you know, a very nice timeless factor to it. That, you know, obviously this was the game that started, you know, the world-renowned Dragon Quest series. And, you know, even though it's very basic, personally I still think it holds up. With regards to completing it, fairly simple. You just got to make sure you grab the best items, best weapons, best armor, and the specialty items as well. Unfortunately, it is a bit of a grind fest. You are going to spend a lot of time just walking back and forth, because some of the weapons in the armor are insanely expensive, and unfortunately a lot of the enemies do not give you not nearly enough gold. So don't be surprised if you're spending anywhere from an hour to 2 hours just walking back and forth the area that has the most powerful monsters, just so that, you know, you can get enough money to actually get some of the best weapons and best armor in the game. With regards to completion, the game does have 2 endings, but it doesn't really require 2 save files. The 2 endings is, you know, you go to Dragonlord's Castle and you tell Dragonlord that you're not going to join him, and you fight him, and then that gives you the good ending. And the other ending is you tell Dragonlord that you're going to join him, and then the game ends, and then that's the bad ending. It's pretty simplistic with regards to completion standards, but for a game that gave me a lot of trouble, especially as a kid and as a teenager, I really wanted to make the time to actually get this game completed and permanently retired. And that was literally the first game that I worked on, you know, while I was home during the winter break. And as I said before, as cryptic as it is and as basic as it is still a really timeless experience, and I actually look forward to giving the other Dragon Warrior titles a try on the NES. You know, I know, you know, they've been remastered or, you know, remade, and they're available on other systems, but, you know, I kind of prefer to play the games how they originally came out, you know, despite the basic graphics or anything like that. So I actually look forward to giving Dragon Warrior 2, 3, and 4 for the NES a try, but, you know, all in due time. Had to grab a glass of water, throat's getting dry, guys. So the second game that I decided to complete over my winter break is a game that's more renowned for its rarity and its price tag than its actual gameplay. But I remember seeing this game, you know, in a copy of Nintendo Power when I was subscribed to it as a teenager, and I just loved the concept of it. And so I really wanted to give this game a try, and I did some research on it. You know, it wasn't that much of a huge time sink. And that game is EVO, The Search for Eden. Quite an interesting little title by Enix. You know, Enix back in the day, you know, they weren't afraid, you know, to take chances, you know, to make some really interesting games with some interesting gameplay mechanics, and I really enjoyed EVO. It's not that huge of a time sink. You can get it completed in about maybe 10 to 15 hours, a little less, maybe a little more, all depending on what you want to do with it. But I just love the concept of being different animals and evolving your animal into whatever you prefer, and slowly going through all the time periods. But much like Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior, it is very grindy, and but I think one of the most captivating things about that game is that the way it keeps your interest is that, especially in whatever time period that you end up involved in, it just gets you anxious and excited to see what your creature will eventually evolve into. And I think it was the whole mystery of how your animal would evolve is made the grinding in that game a little more forgivable, because it does take a long time to rack up enough evolution points to evolve your creature exactly how you want it to evolve, and you're going to have to max evolve it the best you can, or else a lot of the boss fights are going to give you a lot of trouble. You know, I remember some of the boss fights can be incredibly unfair because they can kill you quite easily. I remember, you know, fighting against the Mother Yeti in the Ice Age, and that was an incredibly tough boss fight. You know, you needed like pinpoint timing on your jumps and, you know, knowing exactly, you know, when to bite, because you have to be really up close to your enemies because you have to eat them. You have to keep chewing on them until they eventually die, and then they're meat, and that's how you get your evolution points. You know, you don't really have much in the way of long range attacks in this game. So the entire attacking concept of this game is very much like risk reward. You know, it's just that you do have to get in super close to the enemy, but you've got to do it carefully because you run the risk of getting hit, but also that's the only way you can do damage to the enemy as well. But how I completed this game is, you know, I tried to take on one time era at a time, and the key completionist aspect is that you can save your creatures on your evolution log, and basically what you're aiming for is the max evolution in each time period. Now, you get to eat these crystals that basically evolve you into a really fantastic creature. You know, anything from a dragon to a flying dinosaur to an elephant, of all things. But anytime you eat one of those crystals that gives you a really strange evolution, you have to log that creature as well, because you're not going to get those creatures just through your evolution points alone. So besides the max evolution of your creature for each time period, you know, you also have to put into your evolution log the specialty creatures as well. And that's really the main completionist aspect of that game, is to max evolve your creature in each time period, and to get all the crystals so that you can get these specialty creatures as well. And the game does have different endings. You know, sometimes some of the boss fights that you'll fight, it'll ask if you want to fight it or if you want to join their cause. If you join their cause, you get to see the numerous bad endings that the game has. But thankfully, when you see the bad ending, the game resets and it starts you at the start of the final dungeon, where not the final dungeon, but the dungeon where you fought that boss. So at least it doesn't completely reset you in whatever time period that you started in. But if you're curious to see some of the bad endings that the game has, you know, they're definitely incredibly enjoyable, and you know, they kind of have a bad karma feel to them as well. Okay, so you decided to join, you know, the dinosaur kingdom or anything like that, but you didn't realize, you know, a giant meteor was going to come to Earth and, you know, kill the dinosaurs. So it's kind of hilarious that way. But one of the most interesting things about this game is that in the last time period, if you evolve your creature just right, you can actually evolve yourself into a Homo sapien, into a man with a club. And even though it's technically not the best creature in that time period, it's something you should definitely strive for, aim for, and definitely save in your evolution log, because eventually, you know, you want to reach the point of being a human anyway. So that's the ultimate goal when it comes to Evo, you know, to search for Eden. But unfortunately, it's that game that has the curse that it's more well known for its rarity and its high price tag than its actual gameplay. And that's a crying shame, because too many people look at EVO, The Search for Eden, as a game that's worth a couple of $100. And I think its gameplay and its perplexing concept should be enough to get people to actually try the game to begin with. You know, it should be more well known than just a rare game or an expensive game, because it's an Enix game and it's a highly obscure one, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a really enjoyable one. So I'm finally glad that I finally made time to actually play the title, because I really enjoyed it. And all it really took was a small article in Nintendo Power to get me interested in playing it, and it was actually quite a really enjoyable experience. So anyway, guys, the third game, but before, need another glass of water. I'm getting older, I need water more often. As I decided to go back to the NES, and I decided to focus on one of my favorite platformers for the system that doesn't get talked about not nearly as often as some of the other action platformers for the NES. You know, I completed this game at a friend's house when my wife and I went out visiting this winter. You know, we stayed at an old college friend of mine, and and one of the games that I played at his place, while we were killing time, is the always enjoyable Powerblade for the NES. Now, this is a game that I have beaten before when I used to rent this game. And this game is definitely, in my top 20 NES games of all time. Now, I have before, as a teenager, I have beaten this game. I haven't completed it. But when you think about it, to technically complete Powerblade, as far as I'm concerned, you have to beat the game on normal mode, and you have to beat the game on difficult mode or challenge mode. I forget what it's called. Now, when I was a teenager, I completed the game on normal mode because it is a relatively easy game. It's a lot more forgiving than a lot of the NES action platformers, but I really enjoy this game. And I think it is one of the best action platformers for the NES, and it breaks my heart that it doesn't get talked about that often. It's a title game, I think, and it's just incredibly enjoyable. It's got quite addictive gameplay, and the platforming's just tight. It's, usually a lot of problems with a lot of the NES games is, sometimes the controls are kind of out of whack, and sometimes you don't jump properly, sometimes, some of the levels are really unfair. But this game is designed perfectly as far as I'm concerned. You get the choice of picking, any of the 6 levels. You don't have to put yourself on a specific path or anything along those lines. A lot of the levels have branching paths. It highlights exploration, because in order to get to the boss of each level, you have to find an agent and get the ID card, and use the ID card to get into the boss's chamber. So there's a lot to explore in each of these really 6 levels, and it's actually just a nice quick game to polish off, because it is not too difficult. It does have unlimited continues, and while there's some sections of the level that can be deemed a little unfair, but it's just a lot of the power-ups in the game are really fair. You get health power-ups, quite often. Sometimes you might have to farm for them. You get really great attack upgrades. And it's a crying shame that this game doesn't get talked about a lot, when it comes to the NES. It often gets overshadowed by other, more popular action platformers, such as the Mega Man series and Castlevania and Super Mario and stuff like that. But it's an incredibly enjoyable game, and when I did complete it, I did beat both modes, both normal mode and challenge difficult mode. And the only difference between the two is challenge difficult mode, you don't have as much time to beat the level, and I think you take a little more damage than what you do if you played the game on normal mode. So when it comes to playing the game on challenge difficult mode, you have to be a lot faster, and you don't really have all the time in the world to explore. You just got to go right to the agent, and then right to the boss chamber, and then try to beat the level as fast as you can. But a lot of the boss battles are relatively easy, even though some of them do take a bit of practice. But it's just a really enjoyable game with really great attack power-ups, and it's always to me, one of my favorite NES action platformers, and if I ever get around to doing a top 10 or top 20 list of NES games of all time, Powerblade is definitely going to be there. But as a game that I did beat as a teenager, but now I fully completed it as an adult, the game is now completed and it is permanently retired, and you know, it's just as good now as what it was back then. So, on to the fourth game, guys. So, the fourth game, I decided to go to the JRPG route, and I decided to play a system that I haven't played in a really long time. I do own quite a few games for this system, but I haven't really sunk a lot of time into it, so I decided to spend some time with the Game Boy Advance. And the most popular JRPG for the Game Boy Advance is Golden Sun. A lot of people have played this game, a lot of people have enjoyed this game, but this was a game that I just completely missed out on. So I decided to change that, see what all the hype was, and to see why so many people actually enjoyed Golden Sun to begin with. And I played it, and I absolutely enjoyed it. And I can definitely understand why so many people hold this game in high regard. And it is known as the best JRPG in the for the GBA, and I think it lives up to that reputation. Now, I haven't played every JRPG for the GBA, but I think it's going to be hard to beat Golden Sun. When it comes to the completionist requirements of Golden Sun, thankfully you only need one playthrough. You have to collect all the Dijin. I think there's 7 each for each elemental, you know, wind, water, fire, and earth. And you have to get all the best weapons, armor, and accessories in the game. Those are the standard requirements. And it does take quite a bit of time, especially to get some of the best weapons and armor, because they do have very obscure drop rates, but there is a glitch in the game that you can exploit, that all depending if you save in a certain spot and you completely reset the game and you get into an enemy fight, and all depending on what spells you use, what attacks you use, and the order that your characters attack, all depending on their statistics, you're guaranteed to get that rare weapon drop or rare armor drop. But it is incredibly tedious. And that's where a lot of the time what was spent was trying to get a lot of these specialty weapons and specialty armor. But the game itself is super enjoyable. Still holds up as far as I'm concerned. Some of the dungeons in the game are a little monotonous. You know, it's great that the dungeons have a lot of variety, but some of them just have some really stupid puzzles that, you know, you're just spending a lot of time, you know, just trying to figure out and just get it done. And sometimes it can take you away from the game a bit. But one thing is that it's not boring. Sometimes it gets a little tedious, but, you know, at least it keeps you engaged. But one of the biggest things that I really enjoy about this game is that it's incredibly fast-paced. The battles, the attack animations, the spell animations, like the summons, it's like everything is like super fast, and it's actually great because it gives a great flow to the battles. And I don't find the encounter rate that bad. It's not too high, it's not too low, it's just perfect. And there's actually a lot to enjoy about the game. I did hate the fact that, you know, there was no like teleport with regards to getting to towns or cities quicker, and there was no like airship or anything like that, especially, you know, in the first Golden Sun game. I don't know when I'm going to get around to playing Golden Sun: The Lost Age, but I know it is a direct continuation of Golden Sun. But overall, I put about 50 to 60 hours into it, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't find anything about the game too overly difficult. You know, the boss in the secret dungeon in the game was probably the most difficult boss fight in the game, but by the time I got everything, you know, all my party levels were pretty overpowered and overleveled, and that's why the final boss of the game didn't really give me much trouble. But other than that, it was just like a really super enjoyable experience. And you know, it's a game that a lot of people talk about, but I just never made time for it. So it was one of the things that, you know, I really wanted to sit down and play a portable game system and actually give this title a try. And I really enjoyed it. And the final game that I completed for my winter break, guys, is a game I've been working on for a long time, probably for the majority of this winter break, that some of you guys have probably seen on my Facebook. It was only just a couple of days ago that I finally permanently retired this game and actually got it completed. And I'll tell you, it was quite a chore, but it's done, it's completed, and it is permanently retired. And that is Resonance of Fate for the PS3. Resonance of Fate is quite an interesting one. So why did I want to give this game a try? One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to give this game a try is this game is known as having probably the worst release of all time, because nobody picked it up, because it got released right after Final Fantasy 13 came out. So it was pretty much ignored because everyone else was playing Final Fantasy 13 and completely ignored this title. And it is also known for being notoriously difficult, mostly because of its very obscure battle system. Now, I don't shy away from difficult games. Like, I enjoy a concept known as transitional difficulty. I like games that have a great sense of slowly making things more and more difficult. It's kind of one of the reasons why I avoid playing the Dark Souls and the Demon Souls series, or, you know, Bloodborne or anything like that, because I constantly hear that these games they're just difficult for the sake of being difficult. And I don't like games like that. I do like difficult games, but I like difficult games that give you a good sense of transitional difficulty. You know, sure, you know, the first battle or the first dungeon that you're in, things start off relatively easy, but then they slowly get harder and harder and harder, you know, no matter, you know, how much you level up or anything along those lines. Now, when it came to completing Resonance of Fate, it took me about 230 hours, because it requires 2 playthroughs. And this is a game that you are going to have to invest a lot of time into in order to complete, because the game does get pretty difficult pretty quickly, and you do have the power level in the game. You do have to, like, literally try to complete it to even get remotely far in the game anyway, because a lot of my time in this game was spent doing arena battles. And arena battles, there's 50 ranks, and not all the 50 ranks are available to you. And in order to max out your rank, because you start at 1-1 and then you go to 1 star, and that's 10 ranked battles at rank 1, and then you move on to rank 2, and then you have to fight 10 battles in rank 2, and then you go to rank 3, rank 4, all the way down to rank 50. And sometimes there are ranks that when you reach rank like 4-3 or 21-3, you get thrown into a really tough boss battle, because the majority of the battles in each rank are the same enemies. They're just scattered around the scattered around the battle plane a little differently. But like I said before, you know, sometimes in the third battle of a specific rank, you get thrown into like an incredibly hard boss fight if you're not prepared for it, and you fight a completely different enemy. And that's what a lot of my time was spent doing, because I had to do it. Because you gain levels in this game not necessarily by leveling up, but your weapons have to level up. You get 3 types of weapons. You get handguns, you get machine guns, and you get grenades. And that's how you level up, is when your weapon levels up, you level up. So the more battles that you put yourself in, and the more often that you put because the more battles you're in, the more times you get to use those weapons, and the more times that you use those weapons, the slowly that you level up. So you almost need to sort of complete the game, or try to do as many things in the game as possible to even give your characters a fighting chance of surviving some of the tougher battles to do. Because on my first playthrough, it took me about 180 hours. Because there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of trophies to unlock, there's a lot of obscure items to try to get. You know, you got to fill out the bestiary, the item list, the gun list, max out all your battles in the arena, and there's just a lot to do, and I guarantee you the majority of your time is going to be spent in that blasted arena. Just trying to get your characters leveled up enough to even have a chance of, fighting some of the tougher battles in the game. And then you get a bonus dungeon called Neverland, which is incredibly tough. You could be over level 100 and still have a hard time with it. Like, you can actually level up your characters up to level 300, and because each of your weapons can be leveled up to level 100. Your handguns, your machine guns, and your grenades, they can all be leveled up to level 100. So 3 weapons, 3 times 100, you can be level 300. So, but like, a lot of my characters were around level 230 to 250. And even at those levels, some of the normal battles in Neverland can actually kill me. And so I spent a lot of time, trying to beat that dungeon, because it was incredibly hard. But that dungeon, you also get some of the best weapons in the game. Another thing you have to complete in the game is the wardrobe. The game itself has a huge wardrobe that you can dress all your characters in different outfits and that kind of thing. So you got to complete that wardrobe list. There's a ton of stuff to complete. But like I said, on my first playthrough, I put 180 hours into it, but in order to get the last 2 trophies in the game, you have to play the game a second time. But if you stick to normal mode, because you can play the game on a higher difficulty mode, but anyone who's watched my channel for a really long time, I don't play a game on a higher difficulty unless it unlocks something. If it doesn't unlock anything, there's no reason to do it. So at least in your second playthrough, all your levels carry over, all your items carry over, all your guns, everything carries over. So you can just blow through the second playthrough quite easily. But it is a game that you have to invest a lot of time into. And it's just, and it's like I said earlier, it's just one of those obscure games that mostly got ignored by the gaming public. And I did hear how notoriously difficult it is, but one of the reasons why I wanted to play this game as well is I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for obscure battle systems, and this game has a really great, interesting battle system, because it is like turn-based, but it's just that you use guns and you have to run towards your enemies, and it's just you have to deal scratch damage first, and then you do main damage, and you get to do these like epic flips and combos and that kind of thing. And even though it looks cool for about the first 50 times you do it, you just get used to doing the same motions all the time. And it's just that, but first playing it, it's actually incredibly epic. But, when it comes to me completing a game, I got to stick with it. So I'm really happy that, I finally gave this game a try. And I managed to get Resonance of Fate completed. And a couple of years ago, I got Final Fantasy 13 completed. So those 2 games that got released roughly around the same time are now fully completed and permanently retired. But despite the obscurity of that title, for me, it was still an enjoyable game. I'm glad that I got it beaten. Like I said, it's permanently retired, so I never have to play it again. But I got my enjoyment out of it. It had some really great music. I really loved the battle system. And even though, the story wasn't really the greatest, because it didn't really pick up in the game until like Chapter 9, Chapter 10, because a lot of times you're just doing errands, because you're hunters. So, you look on the bulletin board and you take on certain quests and that kind of thing. But even though the game has 16 chapters, things don't really start to get interesting until like Chapter 9 or 10. So it does take a long time, to get into it, but it's a game that it's not for the faint of heart. If you do want a challenge, I highly recommend giving this game a try, because I really love the characters in it. There's a lot of great voice actors. Nolan North is the voice of Vacheron, and if memory serves me correctly, he's the voice of Deadpool. And I forget the other voice actor's name, but the Cypher in the game is voiced by the same guy who does Robin in Teen Titans. and the girl character, she has a really great voice actress in this game as well. But overall, even though it was the biggest game that I completed over the winter break, I certainly got my enjoyment out of it, because during the time that I'm home over the winter, I always pick one game that I know I'm going to have to put at least 100 to 200 hours into to get it completed. I try to do at least one of those games while I'm home. So anyway, guys, those are the 5 games that I actually completed over the winter break. Now, the games that I'm actively completing right now, but I'm probably not going to touch again until I come home for the winter break next time, is I'm still working on Valkyrie Profile. I'm still working on getting the, I'm still working on filling out all the voices. I'm working on the bosses right now, and I'm working on Loki's voice sample list, and unfortunately that's just incredibly hard to do, because anytime you put yourself in the final boss fight, or when you fight Loki's clone in the Seraphic Gate, he's not guaranteed to say the quotes that you need, but I still need to fill out his voice list. I'm also playing Sakura Wars So Long My Love for the PS2. I've only gotten to Chapter 1 in it, so that's another game I'm going to put some more time into, when I get home. And I'm also playing Mega Man and Bass for GBA, but that's going to be another game that I'm going to try to complete once I get home during the winter break, because when I go back to Alberta, I'm going to be playing a lot more retro titles. This is usually because a lot of the retro titles aren't huge time sinks, so I do have a lot of my mini systems, like my Sega Genesis Mini, SNES Mini, and NES Mini, and I got my wife to install RetroPie on my laptop, so now I have access to a lot of games that I can actually try to complete within a few hours. So that's going to be the majority of my game playing, once I get back to Alberta, when I have the free time to do it, usually on my days off. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching my videos over the winter break, and thanks for all the kind words, because I do appreciate it, even though I don't get to make videos very often. So anyway, guys, take care, and I wish you nothing but the best. Later.